this bike I can just sit on, and I just ride until I'm tired. You know, you ride a regular bike and you start to get sore because you're bent over and you get saddle sore and everything. This one is just a cruiser. You can just keep going and going and going until you just say I'm too tired, and then you go and sit in the chair in the same position. It's like a Harley. You just keep cruising. This is another one. This one's a little harder to ride because your legs go up higher, and so the blood in your legs, it's harder to keep the blood in your legs while you're pedaling, and so it takes more training. But again, it's odd and it's beautiful. This is a German design, Velotechnik, and it really is a sensational bike. So the issue, though, about this design is who's your audience? This toilet has been flushed, and it looks pretty good to some people. See, this is the toilet in MIT in the center, where the Strata Center, where we have the design for Drupal, and what it uses is reclaimed water. So this is actually a quote-unquote green toilet in today's parlance. It fits the audience. The students at MIT, they look at that, they appreciate it, they feel good, everybody feels good about it. Would this work in a restaurant? Would you want a toilet like this in the restaurant? Well, maybe if you'd have to redesign it. Maybe you'd have to use dark porcelain so that you don't really notice the color, and then maybe you could get away with it. But this points up that it's the audience is part of the equation as well. We're not just talking about function against the human body. It depends on who you're interacting with. Now, this is a toilet from a restaurant, and look at that control up at the top. I'd never seen anything like that before, but somehow I knew what it was. Can anyone tell me what that does? Yeah, they're
low flow and high flow.
Yeah, exactly. There's the little flush and the big flush. And sometimes you don't need a big flush. And so I thought that was quite beautiful. And that's in the Southgate restaurant in New York City. Thought it was pretty cool, and I wonder if we'll see more of that kind of thing. So the question is, we've been looking at physical things. Is functional design any less important in software or on the website than it is for your chair or coffee maker or pen or bicycle? Well, it's pretty obvious, you know, how much time you spend on the web, how much you're using your computer. You're all here, so you must spend a significant time on the computer. So this becomes an important issue, and it's not just a matter of abstraction. But what about 3 decades ago? Functional design used to be the realm of product design. This was an industry that went back for centuries, and especially kicked into gear in the Industrial Revolution, where you have the end user interface being designed by functional engineers who are trained and study this, and they practice it, and they experiment with it, and imagine the cost where you're not just rewriting software, but you're having to retool the plant in order to create your new user interface. So once a user interface was found and people liked it, it pretty much stayed the same. So you know, as televisions evolved through the years, pretty much the same controls. Until we got to electronic televisions. And then it changed a bit in that we had to start using these things, and we can argue about how usable these things are. The same is true with radio. We started with your basic radio. There are knobs on the front. You can't see it in the contrast here. And as they evolved through the years, it's pretty much the same thing until we got to the electronic radios, the transistor radios, and these clock radios. I don't know if you've had clock radios where you had to hold down one button and then on the other side turn a wheel or something, try to reset the time, and it was crazy. And then of course you had to read these instructions because you couldn't figure it out for yourself, and God help if you lost the instructions, you'd never be able to reset your clock. You'd have to go out and buy a new one. But the thing is that the same kind of problem happens today. This is the phone that we have at our office. We got a model that's a few years out of date. There's a newer model now. But this is really a 21st century phone design. And yet, it's very difficult to use. You know, where's the speaker button? where's the hold button? And how do you transfer a call? It's over there. And that's right next to redial. And this is an interface ripe for errors. So this also really started to cross the threshold from physical design into software design with the computer. And it was not the early computers, but where they were programmed by card sets and whatnot, but more when you started to have a user interface. This is the Grid Compass computer. It was designed by Bill Mogridge. That's not a phone attached to it down there. That's actually the modem. You had to stick it onto an audio transponder that changed it back into an electronic signal, and you got about a 300 watt connection. Very, very slow. You think your computer's slow today. But this is where software really started to come into play. Now, Bill Mogridge wrote a fabulous book. I recommend this book very much. And he talks about the history of interactive design, and he interviews the designers who are working on this. It's fascinating. It's truly fascinating. The book is like 3 inches thick. Worth every penny of I don't know what it was, $50 or something to get. Very highly recommended. One of the stories he tells is the work that happened at Xerox, where the user interface was really starting to be developed, the graphic user interface. Xerox was deep into this in the 70s, really before Apple was. Apple was aware of what they were doing, but Xerox was really playing around with this. At the Xerox PARC Center, Tim Mott and Larry Tesler and many others were developing user experiences for the computer. What they went for is what Tim called guided fantasies, to learn about the user needs. This is really user experience design and projecting what it is to experience the software. And now it wasn't just the function of intention of the program that was defining the interface. It was what does the user need in order to interact with the system. So this is a shot of the Office schematic that the desktop schematic that Tim Mott sketched on a napkin in a bar while he was waiting for a friend. Started with the idea of what the Office had needed, and then he started working out an analog for the desktop, following that Office analogy. And look at it again. So it's got the desk, wastebasket, file cabinet, and a printer, and then he comes up with the computer analog of it. This was the beginning of the Office metaphor for the desktop. Apple sort of took this ball and ran with it, and actually a number of Xerox people ended up working with Apple, but Apple also developed some of their stuff in parallel, and again, that's covered in the book. Fascinating story. Xerox came out with this thing. This is the Xerox Alto. That box at the bottom is a refrigerator that holds the hard drive. I used a computer like this when I was doing word processing in New York some time ago. And it had a floppy drive where the floppies were the size of a record album, a vinyl record album, and they held like 16K, something like that, 8K. I mean, it was ridiculous. But in that screen, true WYSIWYG, you could see a whole page, a whole letter. And I had to do the letters for this one executive on a machine like that, and everything else was done on IBM machines. But this one, there were only 2,000 of these computers made. Xerox just didn't see it. They didn't understand the market, but Mac did.